Hey everybody, Sam here, the producer tutor, back with another template for you. This time I'm taking you through my Dark Side project, and I'm going to take you through some of my favourite features within this track, so let's dive straight into it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to take you through are all the effects ends that are set up in this project, because there's quite a lot of them. So if I pull up my mixer here, what you'll see is that I've got nine different send slots set up, but I'm never using all of them on any one individual channel. Now you might think that's a slightly peculiar way to kind of organize this session. Let me explain to you what's going on here. So what I've actually done is to place all of those effect sends in one summing folder here. So I've got them all placed in my arrange view, and I've got them all placed in this summing folder. So that allows me to kind of see them and put them away out of sight really easily. I also, if I don't need them in my mixer view here, by the way, you can just right click and then you can deselect the sends option, and that'll just tidy up your mixer view if you don't want to be seeing them there all the time. But what I've actually done here is to keep the same effect send in the corresponding slot. So anything that's going to bus 23 over here is always going to be in this send slot number 1. So you see bus 23, 23, 23, 23. It's always 23 in that slot. And then similarly, the second is for 24, third for 25, etc. down to 31. So what that means is that if I knew that I wanted to send something to my long reverb, which is in 23, I knew that I could just go to that first slot and set up my send there. And then whenever I'm looking to perhaps tweak those levels in my mix later on, I don't have to speculate over, now what was it that I put in that slot? What is where? I know that the first slot is going to be that first effect send, my long reverb. It just helps to keep it really kind of easy to navigate and to know exactly what you've got going on in your project. Because when you're working with a lot of effect sends, if you don't keep yourself organized, you can get yourself in a bit of a pickle. Something else that I find really useful when dialing in send amounts is to use the sends on faders option. If you haven't come across this before, you find it up here in your mixer view and you turn it on with the little power button there. And what it does is to allow you to put any send that you have onto your faders. So if I choose bus 23, my long reverb, in the drop down there, any channel that has that effect send on it will change the fader to that send amount. And you'll see that any other channel that doesn't have that send on it just won't have a fader, so you can't adjust anything on it. And what that allows you to do then is, rather than having to be sort of quite precise here about how much level you're dialing in, which can be a little bit tricky, you've got the fader here instead, which allows you to be much more precise, much more specific about the exact amount of send that you're putting in, which I think is a really nice feature. The second thing that I'm going to draw your attention to is the position of some of my plugins within my insert list. So you'll see that often, not always, but often, I've got my sidechain compression in the same slot in my inserts. So very often, if I just highlight the channels where it's in the same position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, not that one, 6, 7, 8 different channels where I've got my sidechain compression in the first slot in my insert lists. What that allows me to do, if I select all those channels together, is that I can then toggle on and off those compressors all at the same time, which is a very useful thing. Why? Well, if I want to see that I've got enough ducking going on within the context of my mix, I don't really want to be going through and clicking these things off individually one at a time. It's great to be able to bypass them all simultaneously. So let's just have a little listen to that in the context of the mix. Let's go to this drop 2 section here. Now, it's great to be able to do that sort of A/Bing within the context of the mix. A question that I get asked often is, what is the correct position in the insert chain to be doing your sidechain compression? Generally speaking, and there are a couple of schools of thought, generally speaking, it doesn't matter so long as you're not doing anything that's going to change the dynamics of the compression afterwards. So for example, in this channel here, which is this Moog LFO, my compressor's first, and then I've got a channel EQ, a step effects. They're not going to do anything dynamic. And then there's this stereo delay plugin, which is only on at one particular moment. I think it's automated in and out. So there's nothing dynamic that's going to be altering what this compressor is doing in terms of the ducking. In other cases, I've got the sidechain compression later on. So for example, on these two massive channels here, on this pluck and on this main lead, you'll see the sidechain compression is later, and that's because I've got overdrive in the signal chain. I've got another compressor, overdrive here, which are going to be altering the dynamics. So, you know, overdrive is going to be making something kind of more saturated, more distorted, so we'll be making it a bit of a thicker sound. So where you place it is important, but knowing what your processes are doing before and afterwards will inform where you should put that compressor in the signal chain. There isn't a one-size-fits-all rule there, but if you can keep as many of those sidechain compressors in the same insert slot, then it's going to allow you to do that A/Bing that I just demonstrated. Now, the next thing that I want to draw your attention to is the compression that I've got going on my mix bus. You'll see that I've actually got 4 different compressors set up here. Now, in actual fact, this first compressor I'm not using at all. I've got the mix all the way down. I was trying some things with it, but didn't end up using it. But I thought I'd leave it there just so that you can have a little experiment with it yourself. But then I've got a multi-band compressor and 2 further compressors. So what I thought I'd do is just take you through what each of those is doing. So let's bypass those 3. We've got the multi-band compression up here, and let's have a little listen to what is actually going on here. Okay, so you'll see I've got 3 bands set up. I'm not using the 4th band here. So I'm split into basically lows, mids and highs. And the highs are not doing any compression at all. Nothing is even really tickling this meter here. The lows and mids are gently being compressed. The ratio is low, sort of 2 or 3 to 1. Fast attack, fairly fast release as well. But you'll see that most of the work is going on in the mids here. And what that's doing is kind of just squeezing the mix, making it a bit tighter. If we just listen to the mids on their own. Just pulling those elements, just pulling the main sort of guts of the mix together. And what about the lows? So again, with the lows, it's just making them much tighter. It's making them less kind of flabby and loose. So that's my multipressor. Then I've got 2 compressors set up in series. You'll see that I'm using the vintage VCA here. So this is based upon loosely an SSL-G style compressor, which is typically known as the glue. It's really good for gluing things together. You'll see, however, that I've got the mix dialed down to kind of 8 or 9% on each. So they're actually both working in parallel, even though I'm doing serial compression, so they're one after the other. They're also both in parallel, so they're not compressing everything. Let's have a little look at what they're doing to the mix. So this first compressor here. So I've got about 5 dB of gain reduction going on. If I bring the mix all the way up, you'll hear what that's doing overall. So just pulling things together a bit more. And then on this second compressor here, you'll see that basically everything is set exactly the same. Except for the ratio, which is higher. So this is kind of trying to rein things in even further. So you'll see that adding those in parallel is just giving me a bit more energy. It's kind of giving the track a bit more life. But when you hear them fully all the way wet, you heard it was basically just sucking the life out of the mix. So by blending them in parallel, you kind of get that real leveling solidarity from doing something in parallel that adds the energy, but you still have all that nice dynamic range and bounce. So I think that's a really nice trick to know. Okay, also in this mix, you'll see that there are quite a lot of instances where I've got multiple EQs on one channel. So, for example, on this main lead here, I've got this set up here, and then this set up here. And you think, well, why have I got multiple EQs? Well, actually, this EQ is set up in mid mode, so it's only processing the mid channel, the middle of the mix. And this EQ is set up on the sides, so it's only processing the sides of the mix. Now, what do those things sound like if you're new to mid-side EQ? How do you hear the difference? Well, what I can do actually is just solo out this channel. And if I pull out all of the sides, you'll only hear the mids, you'll only hear the middle of the mix. And vice versa, if I pull out the mids, you'll just hear the sides. So you'll hear how I'm processing both those things slightly differently. Now, actually I'm cutting a lot more of the low end content out of the mids than I am the sides. Why is that? Well, because I'm trying to leave more space in the center of my mix for my kick and for my bass to cut through so that they've got room. If I have lots of other tracks with lots of low end content in that area, in that space, it's going to get in the way and detract from the kick and the bass. Whereas with the sides here, I'm actually saying, well, I can have a bit more low end content out there because the kick and the bass are focused more down the center. Now, there is another option to do this. What you could do is you could set up your EQ in dual mono, and then you'll see that you've got a left and a right option. Now, this isn't going to do that mid-side job. What you need to do is click on the little 3 dots here and then change the overall mode of this plugin from stereo to mid-side. And then you'll see that when you go back to your equalizer, you've got a mid channel and a side channel. So you can then do your EQ moves on your mids and sides, and you'll see that you can toggle them between the two different things. So you've effectively got two different methods that you can mid-side EQ with the stock channel EQ in Logic Pro. The last thing that I want to point out to you is just how many presets come within this project. So I've stored every single massive patch within this project, all saved, ready to go. So you can open up any of those patches from the file that is shared with you, and you can use any of those in your own projects. That's great, that's really helpful. But then also every single channel strip is saved and stored as well. So let's look at this bass high channel strip, for example. You'll see that I've got this dark side folder here, and this is all in the template that you can purchase and download. And you'll see I've got this dark side folder with all of the instrument channel strips stored, as well as all of the audio channel strips stored, as well as all of the sends and buses channel strips stored. So once you've pulled these into the right directory in your computer, you can then just dial these up straight away. So let's say you wanted to create a new track, a software instrument track, and you really wanted to find this main lead. Well, it's already stored as a channel strip, so I can just go to my settings, find my dark side, find my main lead, and you'll see that it's going to pull that up with all of the processes that are already on this channel. It comes with everything all ready to go, which is a super helpful thing. So if you know that you really like what you've done in one project and you want to use it in another at some point down the line, saving things as presets, as channel strips, means that you can just grab them from anywhere and use them anytime. There you go, there's another brand new template for you. I hope you really enjoy working with this one. I hope you learn lots from it. You can grab it from the link down in the description below, and if you want to hear this track in full, that's also linked down below in the description. I'll be back for you very soon with another new template, but in the meantime, keep making great music.